Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Friday, March the 25th. And welcome to our commentary. I've got some really good news today to tell you. Some really good news. So we'll start with some good news. Justice Clarence Thomas, he had been in the hospital for a week or so, had some, I guess, flu symptoms. So they put him in just for, I guess they were just trying to be cautious. He was apparently released today. He was released from the hospital today, so he's going home. He's going back to his job at the Supreme Court, when, of course, we're happy about that. So it's good to see Justice Thomas back home. Something I learned today. It really caught me by surprise, but maybe it should not have caught me by surprise. But Justice Thomas is now the longest running justice in the Supreme Court. It's incredible. I'm sure we all remember the summer or the fall when he was nominated, and the circus that surrounded his nomination. It wasn't as bad as Kavanaugh, but it was pretty bad what was done to him, and they tried to destroy him. They couldn't, but that was pretty bad. And I'm sure we all remember that. And that was 31 years ago. So now he's been there the longest, which is kind of cool for him. He's now the veteran. So I'm sure he's enjoying that when he gets together with the rest of the members of the Supreme Court. So welcome home, Clarence Thomas. He's one of my real favorites. Not only is he an excellent Supreme Court justice because he understands the Constitution, but he's also, frankly, a good guy. And if you want to really see what a good guy he is, that television, that documentary that they did about him, when they went one-on-one with him, talking about his life and, growing up with his grandfather and how his grandfather taught him to be a man. It's an excellent documentary. You should watch it. Well, President Biden was in Europe, said a couple of things that were worth talking about. First of all, he's talking about food shortages, and he's exactly right about that. There are going to be food shortages because of what's happening in Ukraine. We talked about this a couple of days ago. I also wrote a post at the American Thinker about this. I mean, Ukraine and Russia are number 3 and number 6 when it comes to wheat distribution. And in the case of Africa and the Middle East, they get a third of their wheat from Russia and from Ukraine. So there's going to be shortages. I mean, there's no question about that, because I'm sure production has been impacted by what's happening in Ukraine. The other thing, of course, that is going to impact food distribution is the cost of transportation. So I don't think it's going to hit us in the United States as hard as it is other places, but we'll get hit indirectly. But places like Africa and the Middle East, they're going to be hit directly because they are customers, if you will, of Ukraine and Russia when it comes to wheat and when it comes to other grains that they consume in their daily diet or whatever. The other thing that President Biden said in Europe, and this really makes me angry because he does this all the time. He brought up, remember that speech that President Trump gave back in 2017, and what he said, there's good people on both sides. He completely, once again, misquoted what President Trump did. That whole thing has been looked at 50,000 ways. Even the Washington Post and people over at CNN admitted that what the president was talking about was that there were good people on both sides of the argument. He wasn't necessarily saying that these people were better. But, the Democrats continue to bring this up. And it's a lie. It's a total, complete lie. So all I can tell you is I don't want to, if you're one of those people who's deeply invested in your hatred of Trump and all you do is see evil every time you see Trump, then there's not much I can do. But if you're interested in actually learning the truth and being honest with yourself, then I would suggest watch the video and then read some of the articles that were written about it and some of the more honest articles that were written about it. President Trump never said what President Biden told the world that he said. What makes President Biden's remarks even more irresponsible is that we have a tradition in the United States that when you go overseas as president, you don't talk about our politics back here. In other words, our politics ends when you leave the country. And yet here's Joe Biden desperately trying to bring up the name of Trump. You know why he's doing it. He's doing it because there is a huge problem within the Democrat Party. We talked about this yesterday, that there is a rift between the center and the left. And the Democrat Party doesn't know what to do, because if either side stays home, they're in trouble. But at the same time, the center and the left cannot coexist. So it's a major problem. And President Biden is always having to talk to the left because that's where the energy is, and they got to show up to vote. So again, big mistake on the part of President Biden to even bring it up. Bigger mistake to lie about it. I mean, that was just absolutely horrible for him to lie about what President Trump said back in, I think it was 2017. Now, of course, the political situation of Joe Biden doesn't get any better, which explains why he's always talking about Trump. He's always talking about Trump because that's the only thing that unites Democrats, and that's when they're talking about Trump. But apparently it's not having much impact on the American people, because we always like to look once a week at the RCP average, the Real Clear Politics average of the approval polls. And what they do is they take the last 10 and they just average it. And right now it's 41%. 41% is a terrible number. I don't know how else to explain it to you. It's an absolutely horrible number for a current president looking at elections in November. So 41% is a horrible number. It basically means 60% of the country doesn't like what you're doing. So he's in trouble. President Biden is in deep political trouble. And he's got to talk about, obviously, Joe Biden or Donald Trump. Joe Biden has to talk about Donald Trump whenever he doesn't want to talk about gasoline or everything else, gasoline prices, which are obviously a disaster. Talking about gasoline prices, the latest little gimmick from some Democrats is to do a stimulus package where they're going to send you money to pay for the gasoline. I mean, I don't think it'll get out of the Congress. I don't think it'll get 60 votes in the U.S. Senate. So it's just a stupid idea being promoted by people who know it's never going to pass. But the idea is they're going to send you cash. So I guess you can pay for the gasoline. Of course, everybody knows that's not going to fix anything, because the problem with gasoline prices has nothing to do with Ukraine, has nothing to do with anything else other than the fact that this administration declared war on the oil business, and we're not producing enough oil. We're not getting enough oil out of the ground. And that's why the price of oil is up and the price of energy. And that's why, people are screaming every time they get their electric bills, because that's just the reality of it. That's just the reality of it. I was listening to an economist last night on the radio, and he was talking about something like 1 million barrels a day less than we were, producing when Trump was president. And he says, you take 1 million barrels out of the American economy, and that's going to drive up the price, which is exactly what is happening right now. I have a post over at the American Thinker today talking about North Korea. It seems like all of a sudden everybody in the world is doing something to get attention. You've got Putin obviously dominating the front pages, China, Iran, and you knew that it was only a matter of time before the little guy from North Korea started shooting missiles. Well, he shot one yesterday, I guess a big one. And there's a lot of concern. Every time he does this, of course, there's a lot of concern in the Middle East. Or not in the Middle East, but, in the China or, Pacific Ocean, because, they're the ones who are going to get hit. But again, this is what happens, when you allow a country to go nuclear. The minute a country goes nuclear, then they become relevant. North Korea without a nuclear weapon would be just another poor country. It probably would not survive much longer. But with a nuclear weapon, they can always leverage that into at least getting some national attention. So this is another confirmation, another reason that you cannot allow Iran to get a nuclear weapon. And if you want to understand why Saddam Hussein have to be overthrown, well, Saddam Hussein with a nuclear weapon or with a chemical weapon would have been a total mess in the Middle East. So at least we don't have to worry about Saddam Hussein having weapons of mass destruction because he's dead, and at least we don't have to worry about that. Big story breaking today that Donald Trump is suing Hillary Clinton and a bunch of other people. And this has to do, of course, with this Russia story that consumed everybody for like 3 years. The whole thing turned out to be a lie. There was nothing to it. There's nothing to it. You had reporters who were writing stories about Russia that all turned out to be wrong. Their sources didn't know what the heck they were telling them. To my knowledge, none of those reporters and none of those sources have been terminated, but they went on for 3 years. Well, Donald Trump is going to sue Hillary Clinton and her campaign. But I think you got to understand what Trump is doing here. Two things very smart of Donald Trump. Number one, he wants to keep the topic on the news, especially if Hillary Clinton decides to run for president, and she probably will be running. The second thing is that you begin the discovery process when something like this gets in the court, so we can see exactly, what Hillary Clinton knew and what she didn't know and what her campaign knew about all these activities. So I think it's a smart move on the part of Donald Trump. Whether it goes all the way, I don't know. But I think it's a smart move to at least get it in the courts and see what happens after it goes into the courts. One quick thing on this day in history, 1634. So that would make it almost 400 years ago, or 500 years ago, I guess. 500 years ago, or I don't know, whatever it is, 400, 500, 1634. The settlement of Maryland began. That's when people, as you know, they were coming from Europe and England at the time, and they would start colonies. Well, on this day, they started the colony of Maryland. And the colony of Maryland, of course, was the first Catholic colony in the United States or North America. And that, of course, made Maryland a very unique colony, but it also made Maryland one of the 13 original colonies. So beautiful. It's a beautiful state. I had the opportunity to live there and go to college there. It's a beautiful state. I don't like the way they govern themselves. They actually have done themselves a lot of harm by the politicians they've elected. But the state is beautiful. Lots of great things to see. And I have fond memories of living in Maryland. Thank you for the time. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.